are Councilman Alan Dom to my right and Councilwoman Helen Gim to my left. I do have some opening remarks, but before I proceed, I want to ask my colleagues, do any of you have any opening remarks? With that being said, particularly for the benefit of those of you who are just not seated in the chambers, but those of you who are at home, it's very important to me that I give you some context about why we're hosting this hearing in the first place. What seems to have begun as a drip, drip, drip a few years ago has now turned into a flood. What I'm talking about is this new era of outsourcing, mergers, acquisitions, and the role of private equity, particularly in the healthcare industry. I know this is happening in other industries, but perhaps the healthcare industry in Philadelphia is so acutely aware of what's happening here because we are a city of eds and meds. And meds being the operative word. Every representative who we've invited to testify here today has been negatively impacted in this new era. I also want to make it clear that we are having this hearing today because of their activism and because they explicitly reached out to me to request my action. As chair of City Council's Committee on Labor and Civil Service, I am frequently reached out to by various unions and industry representatives about issues that are affecting their workers. So as we give some foundation, I want you to just bear with me for the record. The foundation for this hearing began about a year ago, in late 2018, early 2019. Constituents of mine who worked at the Somerton Center and Spring Garden Center nursing homes stopped by my office to let me know that their new owner had slashed worker wages and had made their health care plans unaffordable. At the time, they asked me to write a letter to their new employer, asking them to come to the table and settle a fair contract with quality jobs. Now, I'm going to submit a copy of that letter that I wrote at that time as a part of the public record for today. The situation for the nursing home workers was thankfully, at that time, it was resolved in about a month or two. I had my staff to reach out to SEIU Healthcare for this hearing with the intent of using it as an example of a satisfactory resolution when a new owner comes in. Now, you're not going to believe this. When my staff reached out to them to testify, I was dismayed to learn that the Somerton Nursing Home had another new owner. That quickly, another new owner. And this other new owner was again trying to cut wages and increase health care costs again. For Somerton Center, and to me this was just unbelievable. This means that they've had 2 different owners in this calendar year alone and 3 different owners in about 3 years. The next foundation for this hearing is when Chris Woods, the new president of District Council 1199C, sent me a letter over the summer explicitly asking me to hold hearings as the chair of Labor and Civil Service to examine the fact that Sodexo was a facilities management corporation that lost its contract at Hahnemann in 2018. They refused to pay out paid sick leave and vacation days to their workers. Now, I'm also submitting that letter as a part of the public record today. And then finally, the last foundation for this hearing was when PASNAP reached out to our office in early October. Their request was to discuss the fact that St. Chris's new owners did not intend to recognize their collective bargaining agreement. In particular, their new owners are going after their safe staffing contract language and refusing to recognize their members' accrued paid time off prior to the bankruptcy. When PASNAP reached out with their request for a discussion, I invited them to testify at this hearing since the topic was so relevant to the issues they wanted to discuss. I wanted to provide this background information as to how this hearing came about, to demonstrate to those who are watching at home that this hearing really has grassroots origins. It comes directly from the workers themselves and their own advocacy. SEIU, Healthcare, 1199C, and PASNAP all independently reached out to us asking for assistance. There was no coordination amongst these three entities. It was just what their individual respective members were experiencing in their different industries. What I find so striking is that despite the lack of coordination, they all are dealing with similar issues, and workers who are being negatively impacted, all of them worked in the healthcare realm. Again, the fact that they're all healthcare workers may be because the medical industry is such a large industry in our city, but there's also a very strong chance that these workers are what we will call the canary in the coal mine in Philadelphia, and that the issues that they are facing due to outsourcing, mergers, and acquisitions can and do impact other workers in other industries in this city. In conclusion, the purpose of today's hearing is solely investigative. Once we get all of the testimony on the record, we will be working with the City of Philadelphia's law department, our technical staff, to figure out what legislative remedies we can proffer legally as the local governing body that could assist and protect workers in the future. We're going to hear directly from workers and unions. We're then going to hear today from the Mayor's Office of Labor and a representative from Spear Wilderman, a union-side labor law firm, about what can be done, particularly at the local level. So we really thank you for being here, and thank you for letting me just take some time to provide some context for this hearing. In the meantime, I want to acknowledge the presence of more members of the committee who are here. To my left, Vice Chair of the Committee on Labor and Civil Service, Brian O'Neill. Councilmember Al Taubenberger. To my right, Councilmember Derek Green. Majority Leader, Councilmember Bobby Heenan, and Councilwoman Maria Canones Sanchez. Thank you so very much for your presence. And Clerk, will you now read the title of the resolution being considered today?
Resolution number 190794, a resolution authorizing the Committee on Labor and Civil Service to hold hearings regarding service providers and employers honoring existing and prior worker contract agreements.
Will the clerk please call the first panel to testify on the resolution? And while they're coming up, the chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I really appreciate the ability to listen on these important hearings. Last week, City Council passed a pretty historic bill that requires hospitals to work with the City of Philadelphia, mandates advance notice of any closures of any hospital, emergency room, or maternity ward. And in that plan that they have to deliver, they also have to talk about what they do with collective bargaining. That is a very essential and important part, especially as we know that what happened at Hahnemann was an outrage. It was certainly out of character for what we can see with hospital closures, but it may not be the last one that we see. 1 in 5 rural hospitals is expected to close in the United States across over the next few years. There are 48 other hospitals in the state of Pennsylvania in worse financial condition than what Hahnemann was over the summer. So this is an important hearing. It's an important issue. The federal government has largely had hands off. We really do need partners at the state level to strengthen laws around hospitals, collective bargaining rights, in the event of these kinds of things happening. We want to make sure our folks are protected. We want to make sure that new people who come in don't try to utilize collective bargaining rights, paid sick leave, Medicare or malpractice insurance as means of trade and bankruptcy agreements to extract the most amount of profit. We want to make sure that the future of our city is strong, even as we try to weather some of these situations that are happening across the healthcare economy. But we as a city are going to certainly need to step up to be active in this field. And if we are in partnership with our labor unions, with our communities, with the wide spectrum of folks who are impacted by this, with our patients, we can actually see change move from the ground up. What happened to us at Hahnemann must not and will not ever be forgotten, but it is your stories that will help make the change, not only here in Philadelphia, across the state, hopefully, and eventually in DC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gim. Will the clerk please call the first panel to testify on the resolution?
Wendell Royster, Shanrika Nelson, Dion Gary, and Joy Fleming.
As the first panel is approaching the microphone, I'm going to ask Ms. Fleming if you would start first, because I know we have some scheduling challenges here today. Good afternoon to each of you, and please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Joy Fleming, and I've been at St. Christopher's Hospital for over 27 years. We take care of some of the most vulnerable kids in the area, some of the most poorest families, and we have been through such turmoil in the past, I guess since Tenet bought us. They were a for-profit company, and then we were sold over to AHS, and now we're being sold over to Tower, who's nonprofit. But we have stuck there through all of it because we love the kids, we love taking care of that population of kids, and it means a lot. We're really scared because they're not honoring our contract. Tower has said, we have tried multiple times to meet with them to honor our contract for the safe staffing, which we fought very hard to get into our contract. Prior to the safe staffing, you would be a nurse, you would pull to other areas of the hospital that you had not any familiar with. I work in the neonatal intensive care unit, but I could be pulled to take care of an 18-year-old kid with sickle cell, who I have no knowledge base. So ever since we got the safe staffing, like the NICU nurses would only take care of 3 and under, and the assignments were appropriate, and we kind of felt secure, like you weren't anxious every day going to work. So Tower they just kind of ignoring our safe staffing. They won't recognize it. So the nurses at the hospital that have stayed through the bankruptcy, stayed all summer not knowing what was going to happen, are really scared. And we're scared too that we're going to lose more nurses and it's going to create more unsafe conditions. The other thing was a lot of us have earned a lot of PTO time, and I have been there for 27 years and I have never not had any time, and they have deducted all our time, so I'm going into a negative 88-hour balance, and that's what the majority of the nurses have no spare time, where even if they were out sick, that they would get paid. So people are really scared about their paychecks and their security, along with the health insurance that the new company has talked about, where the tier 1 will be either we have to go to Chestnut Hill or Reading, which is like 50 miles from some of us. And if not, then we are tier 2, and our deductibles and our copays are so high that people are really getting nervous. I'm thinking it's really going to affect the retention. And we're just very upset because we really want to take care of the kids. A lot of nurses have been there for years, like 20 years, 30 years, and they've stuck out through all this. And then they saw Hahnemann close. And so they're scared that that could happen to us also. So that's basically the most of it. We were hoping that Tower would come in as a nonprofit, accept our staffing language, and adopt our contract, because they got us at bargain rate. And we did make over the money that they acquired us for last year, I think it was like 3/4 a year, we made $58 million. They bought us for $50 million, and they won't even value us or honor the nurses. Their attitude to us is like, you're lucky that we bought you, that we saved you, and you have a job. They don't seem to even value the nurses' experience or their professionalism or anything, and the nurses are very upset about this.
Excuse me, Ms. Fleming, just for the record, I know
Sure.
you have some scheduling constraints. Will you be able to stay? Because usually what we like to do is hear testimony from all members of the panel.
Yeah, I
And then
could-
we begin asking questions. So
Okay.
we don't want to let you go because we have
That's
questions
fine.
for you.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, here. Switch sides? We can switch seats.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Dion Gary, and I'm proud to be an administrative organizer for District 1199C, National Union of Healthcare and Hospital Workers. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. District 1199C is one of the largest healthcare unions in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have over 13,000 members throughout the Philadelphia region. These workers are mainly employed at hospitals, long-term care facilities, and other parts of the growing healthcare industry. I worked closely with our members at Heinemann University before it was shut down. I also worked at Heinemann for over 16 years before joining the staff of District 1199C. I am here today to provide information to City Council about the treatment of our workers by Sodexo, a major facilities management corporation with contracts throughout Philadelphia. Specifically, District 1199C is deeply concerned about how Sodexo has treated our workers who are employed at Heinemann University Hospital prior to being closed. Our members were treated very unfairly by Sodexo, and we want to know if what occurred was an isolated incident or part of a pattern of misbehavior by Sodexo that should be informed contracting decisions in the future. Here's what happened. Sodexo had a contract to provide both dietary and environmental services to Heinemann, with members of District 1199C doing the actual work. According to the contract, these workers had the right to earn sick, vacation, and personal time. However, when Sodexo lost the contract in 2018, they refused to pay out the earned sick time to our members. According to our calculations, former employees at Heinemann are owed over $218,000 in compensation from Sodexo in connection to both earned personal and sick time. This is particularly outrageous because many of the same workers who were shortchanged by Sodexo at Heinemann lost their jobs when the hospital closed and the corporate owners declared bankruptcy. However, it should be noted that Sodexo is not bankrupt. In fact, Sodexo remains a very profitable company and lucrative contracts throughout the Philadelphia region. Sodexo can certainly afford to pay our members the sick and vacation time that they were owed under the pre-existing contract, especially as many of them are struggling in the aftermath of losing their jobs at Heinemann. We are simply asking that Sodexo pay our members the money that they are owed. This has obviously taken on a new urgency with the closure of Heinemann, which has negatively impacted many of our same workers that Sodexo has refused to pay out for sick and earned time. These employees are currently trapped in limbo and deserve to be treated fairly by all parties involved in the management of Heinemann, including being paid what they are owed by Sodexo. Again, we want to know if what happened at Heinemann with Sodexo is an isolated incident or an indication of how they plan to treat hardworking employees in the future. If so, we hope that our local government officials will hold this company accountable and make sure they do not continue to profit off the backs of workers, especially those who have lost their jobs due to corporate greed of Heinemann owners. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing. I welcome any questions.
Hello, my name is Shanrika Nelson, and I'm a certified nursing assistant at Summerton Nursing and Rehabilitation Center here in Philadelphia. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm here on behalf of my coworkers and my residents at Summerton Center. I have spent 25 years caring for people in my nursing home. Those people are my family. My coworkers are my family, and someone needs to speak for them today. Much like Heinemann Hospital, our nursing home was recently sold. In fact, it's been sold twice in the last 3 years. Each time a new owner took over operations at our home, our contract was canceled. Our pay and our time off were cut dramatically, and our health care costs skyrocketed and became unaffordable for most of us. This sort of upheaval and uncertainty for our staff was nothing compared to what our residents felt. Each new owner brought new cuts to services and supplies and hardships for the vulnerable people who look to us to provide comfort and care. Residents have gone without ice on the hottest days because our ice machine is broken. Essential supplies like washcloths and towels are allowed to run out because having more clean linen will cost more money. Broken, outdated equipment gets the bare minimum of repairs instead of being replaced. We even heard rumors that our ambulance company was changed because our previous company was owed money and bills went unpaid. Many of my coworkers, myself included, haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. If we can take a sick day or a personal day, it's unpaid because each new owner continues to cut our time off. Thanks to pay cuts and impossible insurance costs, health care has become out of reach for many of my coworkers. One of my coworkers has worked at Somerton for over 20 years, and she can't get the important life-saving medication she needs because she can't afford it anymore. How can we be expected to care for residents who badly need us if we can't even take care of ourselves or our families? Those of us who do this job do it because we care. We have compassion for the people who need us. No one is trying to get rich working in a nursing home. But it seems like it's all about money for the companies that keep buying us. And this isn't just happening at my nursing home. It's not happening here in Philadelphia. It's a story that repeats itself again and again across Pennsylvania and across the country. It's been reported on now in countless stories in newspapers and on TV, and yet this keeps happening. No one seems to be doing anything about it. That's why I'm here today, to ask for help. Pennsylvania hasn't updated regulations for nursing homes in over 20 years, and while they may be talking about it now, we know that Harrisburg moves slowly. You can do something to help people here in Philadelphia. You can make things better. We need laws that protect nursing home residents and those of us who care for them from these companies that want to come in and find a way to squeeze money out of our communities. We need laws that say you have to continue to invest in direct care for residents. We need laws that say you have to pay a living wage. We need someone to be watching when the nursing home gets sold to some unknown out-of-state company and then follow up and make sure that they are being responsible to the residents and to the workers. And we need someone to hold companies accountable when they aren't living up to those responsibilities. Everyone deserves to age with dignity. I'm asking you to respect that. I'm asking you to protect our most vulnerable communities so that when it comes time for your loved ones, when it comes time for you to look for someone to care for you in your time of need, that you aren't left to the wolves in sheep's clothing. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Wendell Royster. I'm the Vice President of SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania, and we service 45,000 nursing home workers, hospital workers, and home health care aides across the state of Pennsylvania. I would like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today on behalf of thousands. I would like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today on behalf of thousands of nursing home workers and the countless people who rely on us to care and passion here in the greater Philadelphia area. These people need your help. The long-term care industry in this country is failing them. It's failing all of us. Like Hahnemann, nursing homes across the state of Pennsylvania are being sold off to bad actors, to investors that focus on profits, and to neglected landlords whose sole goal is to squeeze every last dime out of the workers, out of the residents and their families, and out of our communities. Somerton Center is a sad example of a disturbing trend. I would like to take this time to let you know that this is personal for me because I come from Somerton Center. I was a worker at Somerton Center 25 years ago when this contract came about. Somerton Center holds a special place in my heart, and I started off as a housekeeper 26 years ago. It was at Somerton Center that I first learned to use my voice to create a change. I could make things better for the co-workers and my residents. It was Somerton that I learned the power of the union. Now my union brothers and sisters and residents that they care for are under attack. Somerton has had three different owners in as many years. And each time it's so, the workers have much of what they fought for taken away from them. This type of ownership change is extremely disruptive to both the residents and the caregivers, and it almost always leads to weakening the standards for everyone. And yet the workers continue to stand up and fight for what's right, and they are workers to protect the residents. They are fighting for each other. These workers and the workers like them in the nursing homes all over Philadelphia need your help. They need you to fight for them. The state is struggling when it comes to oversight and enforcement of existing laws. There is a need for more resources and tools to investigate the potential buyers and hold these operators accountable. And when they fail to live up to their promise of providing quality care, this lack of need of oversight and enforcement of laws was directly responsible for the catastrophic Skyline fiasco that we've seen just happen. Many of you can remember the shocking tales of the nursing home workers going unpaid for weeks and spending what little money they had to buy food and water for the residents when the owners of their nursing home, Skyline Healthcare, stopped paying their bills to feed, medicate their residents. Skyline was permitted to operate these homes for more than 14 months before the negligence of the criminal behavior was brought to light. This is exactly why we need more involvement from the lawmakers like yourselves. What we need is more transparency and effective oversight of potential buyers. Potential buyers should be investigated for financial stability and sustainable financial structures that ensure continuous quality care for our residents. Stakeholders, including workers, residents and their families, taxpayers, lawmakers like yourselves, should have the opportunity to weigh in on potential buyers with the public hearing. We need requirements for new owners to freeze the conditions that's on the ground when they take over the control of recent purchased homes. They should agree to maintain existing wages and other staffing standards for the designated period of time to assure a smooth transition. What we need is more involvement at every level from responsible leaders like yourselves. Right now, the Department of Health is reviewing Pennsylvania nursing home regulations, including overseeing the changes of ownership. I strongly encourage you to reach out to your colleagues in the Philadelphia delegation, and I urge them to weigh in with the governor to strengthen the oversights of the nursing homes and ownership changes. We are counting on you to live up to the faith and the trust that your constituents have put you in to fight for us, to protect us, and to lead their time. Protect them from their time of need. Thank you. And sorry for stuttering, I'm just a little nervous.
Don't worry about it. Thank you all so very much
Thank you.
for your testimony. And let me just say for the record, specifically to Ms. Nelson and Mr. Royster, the reason why your testimony was so important because you affirmed for us that this is not simply about closures. This is not simply about closures. When we think about how this is overall impacting the industry, this is also about outsourcing. This is about mergers and acquisitions. So we can't just focus solely on the issue of closures. We have to think about when these new owners come in. So thank you for your testimony. We have Councilwoman Sanchez, Councilman Green, and Councilman Taubenberger in queue. But one quick question from PASNET because I know you have to go. You said that they are going after your safe staffing contract language. And for the benefit of somebody who is watching at home, if we're talking about patient to nurse ratio, explain what that is on the record.
Okay, so we have staffing grid.
the microphone, and please identify yourself for the record.
Okay, my name is Joy Fleming. I'm a nurse at St. Christopher's Hospital in the NICU. So we have staffing grids for every unit at a hospital based on where we work. So I work in the neonatal intensive care unit. So we have like 2 to 3 patients per nurse, but also in our staffing grids, we have an extra nurse who's like a resource nurse who will help out, like if you need like to get meds co-signed, retaping breathing tubes, doing trach changes and stuff like that. Prior to this, we didn't have that. So prior to this, we had a charge nurse who was in charge of maybe, like we have between, I guess, 25 to 28 patients, and had to oversee everything going on, but they were also the resource nurse. So they would be stuck in a situation not seeing if a baby was crashing, because the babies can actually change over time, and see for the next shift, does that baby need just one nurse? You know, does that baby need more like intensive care than other babies? So it was like they were also admitting babies, the charge nurse. So they weren't overseeing and able to do their job prior to having this resource nurse. So this kind of just puts that in place, and it also puts in place that nurses that are not critical care certified, they can't just come to the NICU and take care of a critical care baby or the ICU. So it kind of kept all the critical care nurses in one section of the hospital. The ER was closed off, so they have their own unit, because if you're a nurse on the floor, you're not used to taking care of an ER, so how could you possibly function with no training or anything in that situation? So it just put these safeguards in place that, you know, you weren't just used wherever they needed you, so they could give more people off and to save money for staffing. So
Finally, you said that they are refusing to recognize your members' accrued paid time off prior to the bankruptcy. About how much time do you think we're talking about here?
a lot of time, so prior to the bankruptcy, we were told that they would recognize any time accrued between July and December when they bought the hospital. So the staff already had their like planned summer vacations and everything, and then a lot of us did cash in, which we were allowed to in our contract, our time. So instead of using that money, that was our compensation that we earned for years, they have deducted it from that period of time when they said at July 1st, when Tower didn't even own us. We're still getting paid checks from AHS. Our paychecks are still showing that everybody has positive balances, yet they're coming back and saying, no, this is wrong. And nobody has addressed it to us. Nobody has fixed it. Nobody has been truthful about it. So we've been kind of kept in the dark until now when they're taking over on Friday and they're saying, well, they're going to balance everybody out, and since everybody's negative, we'll keep everybody at 0. So they have essentially no time. And this was time earned prior to the bankruptcy. That was part of our compensation.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the committee for having this discussion. If we learned anything from the Hahnemann situation is that we do have to be very diligent. I just, for the record, so my colleagues understand, St. Christopher's Hospital is such an important hospital to the city of Philadelphia, and if you work at St. Chris, you want to be at St. Chris. We have some of the best doctors and best nurses who can work anywhere and make a whole lot more money, and they've chosen to be in St. Christopher's. What makes St. Christopher's unique is the specialty surgeries which it conducts. And we want to make sure, and we want to commit to both PASNAP, 1199C, and all the members over at St. Chris that we are going to make sure that the new owners hear from us about the value. St. Chris cannot just be a traditional hospital or a medical center. It is a specialty hospital, and it is those specialties that allow and support all the other community preventive work that happens. St. Chris is one of my largest employers, and I want folks to know that this council, and I know this mayor will, as he has been in the past, are going to keep our eyes on what's going on. We want to thank PASNAP, 1199C, and the doctors for all being united around that, and we will definitely do our part in sending a message that they have to not only honor the wording, but honor the values by which St. Chris have been created and which we have been successful. We have gone through 5 owners. the time I've been elected, I've been through several owners, and I have many times been outside in the picket lines and in the protest lines with the unions. And we will make sure that your work is valued and the work that is conducted at St. Chris is valued. We do not expect, and we completely understand the issue with IBC, Health Partners, and the referral system, and we know that no one from North Philly is going to Reading to get any surgery. We are very clear about they don't need to go to Reading, right? We have all the specialty here. So we thank you for your advocacy, and we look forward to working with you through this transition. I know the next few months are going to be bumpy. I know for the doctors and the specialty doctors who are there, who want to be there, they're extremely concerned. And it is all of you being together, the nurses supporting 1199 and the doctors supporting the nurses and 11 and 99C. You're going to see a very unique grouping and coalition of advocacy to protect St. Christopher's Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank this panel for your testimony today. To me, this is an issue that's not only an important issue, as my colleague, Councilman Maria Aquino Sanchez said, who represents that district in reference to St. Christopher, but this is an issue for the entire city of Philadelphia, not just from a healthcare perspective, but also for an economic development perspective in the city of Philadelphia. But for me, it's also a personal issue. Many people in this room know that my son is on the autism spectrum. For over 12 years, our developmental pediatrician was at St. Chris. So one of the main motivations for me, not only from my role in this body, but participating in the activity we had this summer, was the personal nature of the great care that my families received from St. Christopher's. But this issue is, what's interesting is that when I listened to the testimony of the panel, I heard about a lot of different things that were troubling when new owners come in, but what I didn't hear was patient experience. And my wife has worked in healthcare for about 25 years, actually about 30 years, and every hospital talks about we're trying to enhance the patient experience. But when these new owners coming in, from what I'm gathering from your testimony, I'm curious if you can reflect on that. Has there been any discussion of how do we enhance the patient experience? What I've heard is opportunities for new owners to enhance their bottom line on the backs of members of 1199C, PASNOT, SEIU, who are working at these hospitals, but nothing really motivating on how to enhance the patient experience, because when you're in healthcare, either at a senior facility or a hospital, you're trying to provide the best care and enhance that patient experience, because that is your means of business. You're trying to provide healthcare and patient experience and enhance that. So from your perspectives, when these new owners have come in, other than try to reduce expenses and reduce benefits to the people that work there, have you heard any conversation about how do we enhance the patient experience? And the reason I ask that question is because when they're not talking about that and they're impacting you, that's going to impact someone like me who has a child that's going to St. Chris. So what has been a conversation at all from any of the new owners on what they're trying to do to enhance the patient experience, if at all?
No, just that they don't like our staffing grids. They want to be able to do what they want. So, I mean, that would directly affect the patient experience. Do you know what I mean? You don't want somebody taking care of your child who's not trained in that area, you know. But nothing about that we've heard of. We haven't heard anything, just really that they don't like our staffing grids. But they're not really explaining why. They're a nonprofit, so people were very hopeful and happy that a nonprofit was finally going to take over St. Chris, because prior to this it was for profit, and we saw a lot of stuff happening because of that. So, yeah.
But we've also had other nonprofits that have come into Philadelphia that have not done the best job. When I think about Ahurst and that Allegheny Health system that came in reference to Hahnemann some years ago as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you. Let me just quickly ask 1199C. In your testimony, you said that former employees at Hahnemann are owed over $218,000 in compensation from Sodexo in connection to both earned personal and sick time. About how many former employees are being impacted by this?
At Hahnemann, about 350.
about 350. And I know that, you guys are in court over this, so I know that there's, a very limited amount about what you can say, but what kind of response or explanation did the firm give to you all about why they can't afford to pay members, even though they did not declare bankruptcy and they're in the black? Did they give you an explanation?
Well, that's part of the problem. No, they didn't. They just figured since the hospital was going bankrupt that they got them off the hook and they wasn't accountable to pay any of the people the time that they accrued by working under them. The hospital is bankrupt, but the company is not. They have accounts all over, even at some of our other places. So through efforts of us trying to get them to do some type of fixed bargaining or something like that, which we wasn't successful, that's why we end up in court for their time, for their personal time, vacation time, and their sick time.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Madam Chair, thank you very, very much. And panel, I thank you for your really insightful testimony on issues that we really need to know about. And Ms. Gary, 1199C, I'm a big admirer of Mr. Woods and your union as a whole, because I think you do great work in an area that a lot of people don't realize how important that work is. And educating the public and representing these union members, I think, is very, very vital. I do have a couple questions with Sodexo.
Okay.
You say that is now in the court system?
Yes.
Is that in the federal court or in the state court?
I'm not sure
Okay.
at what level is that.
Okay. And at Hahnemann, how many union members were working in Hahnemann at the time?
It was about 750, but at least 350 of them was outsourced from dietary, environmental service, and the transportation department. Those was all outsourced to Sodexo and Crawford, two outsourcing companies. But
Well, then the members that worked, it was outsourced to Sodexo directly,
Yes, but they worked
they
at-
were members of 1199C.
yes, they were members of the 1199C.
Because that's a sizable amount of money, $218,000.
Yes.
Does Sodexo today operate any other operations with hospitals in Philadelphia or in our region?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
They're in
That's why I'm on
Presbyterian.
this committee. I'm sorry.
Presbyterian, they are in Presbyterian. And I'm not sure, I think out of the hospitals, that's the only one. that we have
Presbyterian in
Sodexo.
the boundaries of the city of Philadelphia. And then,
Well, Sodexo did.
I'm sorry, where?
Sodexo also operates in some of our nursing homes.
Oh, really? Nursing homes, okay.
They do. They're subcontracted out as well in some of the nursing homes.
Do any come to mind directly that you know?
Berksheim Nursing Home. Berksheim Nursing Home.
Berksheim? Okay. Okay.
Sodexo was in St. Chris as well.
Oh, and they're in St. Chris as well?
Yes.
Doing similar, they're
I
essentially
believe
food
it's
service.
environmental services, possibly food service, but I know environmental services.
Environmental services. Okay, okay. Any sense, I know you're not an attorney, but how deep is this? Do you think there'll be a resolution soon in the court system, or is it they just dragging their feet?
We hoping it will be, because those members that, especially for the members that lost their jobs at Hahnemann.
Absolutely. I mean, to be owed $280,000 to a company which it appears to me is solvent, these things should be paid. And I'd like to know what their explanation is on why they don't.
And it don't just happen at closures. When they lose the account and maybe another subcontractor come in and they won't pay the sick time and the personal time to the employees. So when they start with this new company, they starting with zero. Even if they have 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years
Really?
of service, they're starting with no sick time. So they can't even get sick, even though nothing is changing in
So
their.
that's generally one of their sort of business practices, as bad as it is. So they lose the contract, they're out, and
Yes.
they just like disappear off the face of the earth.
Yes.
It's an awful business practice. And being they're still in Philadelphia, I think, we as a city government should make sure that the world knows about this, and certainly our city government knows about it.
Yes.
I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Councilman Taubenberger, for your line of questioning, very much needed. And do know that we do have our law department right now. Councilwoman Gim and I were just talking, trying to figure out a legal way for us to hold firms that engage in this kind of behavior accountable. Before we hear from my colleague, Councilwoman Helen Gim, and passing that, I know you're going to have to go, so just bear with us for a second. You successfully negotiated successorship language with Temple University Hospital. Now, for those who are not familiar with that, successorship language is actually a clause in a contract that requires the new owner to honor an existing contract. Tell us, how long did that take you? When did you accomplish it?
So I wasn't involved in that because I'm a
Talking to the mic.
So I don't know.
Just speaking to the microphone.
I wasn't involved in that because I'm at St. Chris, but maybe one of the other PASNAP reps that are back there.
So we'll have the attorneys who are will come and they will speak later, but that is
Okay.
something that we definitely need you to
Yeah.
get on the record here today. Thank you.
I guess the other thing was we didn't feel like, I guess we didn't do that because they had just bought our company. They were only bought our company for like 18 months and now they're already bankrupt. So I guess nobody imagined that was going to happen after the negotiation because it was such a short period of time.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I really do also want to acknowledge this group with 1199C and SEIU Healthcare and PASNAP. You've been at the forefront of some of the most serious issues that are facing our nation right now, but especially coming home and hitting our city. We stood together with you through multiple fights. We certainly are going to be even stronger. What we've lost makes us realize what's at stake, not just simply forgetting about what has happened in the past. I do want to put on the record, Madam Chair, that Sodexo holds a number of different contracts, not only private but also public. They are active with the School District of Philadelphia, for example. And so it is important to know that as companies seek public contracts with public entities, we as a city should be diligent and vigilant about making sure that companies that in any way potentially violate wage theft ordinances, which I would think that wage theft is a very important issue here in our city, or any other collective bargaining rights that are clearly established by the city, we want to put them on notice, and it would be a big help for our unions to make us, as you did today, make it crystal clear that what we're talking about is simply not a convenience when a company goes under or there happens to be a merger, that there's a new bonus for the company executives, but that in fact, this is people's well-earned wages, and the impingement or infringement of people's rights to their earned time, I think should be seen by the city as an issue around wage theft and not simply about a negotiation pattern to be worked out in court. But we're going to have more conversations about that. I also want to thank PASNAP for your incredible work on successorship language, on the staffing ratios. These are really important areas of new rights that we want to see established as not just something that exists and breathes within just one particular one-off contract, but is really a standard that we try to meet. And certainly, I think, as folks said, bargain basement kinds of buyouts do not give you the right to abridge the rights of your employees. This is not where we try to try to make your bottom line or your profits work. I'm really thankful, Ms. Nelson, and sorry that your dedicated years to a profession that has brought comfort, protection, health care to so many needy communities is a matter of starting over and over again, like hitting a reset button every time a company comes in. My colleagues and we know that the healthcare industry is fragile. It is true. It is not just about closures. It is about consolidations and mergers and shifting of resources from here and there. Many of our largest entities own multiple different smaller subsidiaries, and we must remain diligent and hyper-vigilant about making sure that these things are protected. I also wanted to put on the record that in the fair scheduling law that we were able to work with which was an expanded labor rights law for part-time workers, we made sure that collective bargaining units were not eliminated from that protection. And the reason why is because it's a fundamental constitutional right that you cannot actually bargain away rights that have been later established. You can maybe in the future negotiate them, but you should not be carved out by law of rights that should be afforded to the broader public. So as we kind of look into 2020 and beyond, I think it is really important to us that if we have a set of labor laws, that we make sure that collective bargaining units are protected. It is an outrage that you are not part of the paid sick leave law. And I think it is important for us to review that, and we'll certainly be talking about that in the future with our city solicitor's office, with the city's labor department. And we would really like to hear from you as well why it does matter, because it is a shock for you to be in the healthcare industry and to not have certain rights around paid sick leave that are given to every worker otherwise in the city of Philadelphia, including part-time workers. So, but I just want to thank all four of you for your testimony and for your push to have us do more and better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask relative to the Somerton Nursing Home. How many workers are currently there? Do we know how many workers currently work at the Somerton Nursing Home?
For Somerton Center, it's 125 that we have charted. And
125?
Yes, and just for the record, you said earlier, Spring Garden.
Garden
It's Garden
Springs.
Springs.
Garden Springs.
And at Garden Springs, we have about 75 members there, but it's outside of the city limits.
How many patients would you say you serve?
I think it's about 234 residents at Somerton Center.
And when Somerton was sold to the Vita Healthcare Group a year ago, do you know how many workers were working there then?
It was more than 125. Folks actually left because they depleted their benefits of going to school, because they had education and training fund where the employer put in 1% of, their payroll for folks to go to school. So folks were on the hook for that money, to finish college and stuff like that. But it was much more than 125 at that time.
And the reason why I wanted you to make sure that you put that on the record is because we have to assume that there's been like a churning with the staff. Either you quit, you retire, you leave for better opportunities, or you say, now I'm going to just have to go back to school. But as a result of this transition, people have had to find a way to make ends meet another way, and I wanted to make sure that you put that on the record. For those remaining staff that are left behind, tell me, what do they feel relative to their job security and how they're providing for their families? We heard the testimony, but for somebody who is at home, who is watching, who is not familiar with the industry, I want you to tell me, what are people feeling right now who are still there?
I mean, I'm one of them people, so I can tell you how I feel. And majority of my coworkers, we feel it's a sad situation. I mean, we've been there for years. We've been giving our all, and to see that it's a different place to work than it was when we was there 5 years ago. For you not to be able to go on vacation with your family for years and years, all because of these companies keep taking over. We're trying our best to just stick in here, because we love our residents. But the things that's happening, and that this company is not, honoring our contract, and that the company do not care about the residents or the staff, it's hard. It's really hard working there. You never know what's going to happen. After it was sold, this is like the third time that the building was sold. After this contract, we don't know if it's going to be sold again, because it seemed like it just keep happening every year.
Right. I just also want to note for the record, again, when I got engaged with this issue, this was about a year ago, and that was when I wrote my support letter to the Vita Healthcare Group. And in my letter, I noted that some employees' wages had been slashed about 30%, And I don't want anyone to be shocked when I say this, but that workers' health care deductibles had gone up to $10,000. I want you to think about what that would be like if you are going to work every day and you may get sick or you need access to health care and you realize that you have a $10,000 deductible. It was really it was unbelievable. How long did it take at the negotiating table to reach a contract for workers? Tell me for the record if you can.
Well, under Vita, it took us 6 months. Now, since we're under Imperial, it's probably like another 6 months, so that'll be like a year that it's going to take for us to even settle a contract. But once we settled the contract under Vita, it's like we got one raise, and that was it, and then it was sold to Imperial. So now we're back at the table again, trying to negotiate a contract again, like we just did 6 months ago.
Thank you. Are there any other? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to add an injury to insult. The Vita Group that bought the facility a year and a half ago, this gentleman now that owns Imperial was one of the partners of Vita. So he stuck a straw in the ceiling of this place and took people's benefits. Then he broke partners with that Vita Group. Now he's back sticking another straw in the ceiling to deplete the little bit of things that they was able to keep in Vita.
Listen, we want to thank you all for your testimony. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Again, thank you all so very much. Would the clerk please call the next panel to testify on the resolution?
Thank you.
Thank you all so very much.
Amanda Shimko and Samuel Spear.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record, and then you may proceed with your testimony.
Sure. My name is Amanda Shimko. Good afternoon, Chairperson Parker and members of the committee. I'm Amanda Shimko, and I am the Compliance Manager in the Mayor's Office of Labor, specifically the Office of Benefits and Wage Compliance. I appear before you today to testify on resolution number 190794. This resolution will authorize the Committee on Labor and Civil Service to hold hearings regarding service providers and employers honoring existing and prior worker contract agreements. This is a very important issue, and as highlighted in the resolution, there have been several recent cases in Philadelphia where new ownership has come in and tried to terminate a contract. Workers bargain in good faith, and it is simply wrong that hardworking men and women in Philadelphia, or anywhere for that matter, should have to worry that agreements, which were also signed onto by management, could become void when a new owner takes over. It is a highly disruptive practice that clearly violates the spirit of collective bargaining rights, and in some cases may also violate the law. This administration believes that new ownership should always honor pre-existing contractual relationships with their employees. On behalf of Mayor Kenny, I'd like to thank you for taking this opportunity to shine a light on this disruptive practice. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Samuel Spear. I serve as outside counsel for SEIU Local 32BJ. I'm a founding partner of the law firm Spear Wilderman PC, and I've been practicing labor and employment law exclusively on behalf of workers and labor unions in Philadelphia for 40 years. Local 32BJ has been at the forefront of fighting for justice for all workers for almost 90 years. We know firsthand the injustices workers face from employers who try to skirt the law. The displacement of workers following the transition to a new employer is not anything new. We agree it's terrible. It's a way that employers try to cut wages, and it impacts the overall well-being of the worker and the workplace. After working on one job for decades, a worker shouldn't have to start from ground zero with respect to wages and benefits when a new contractor takes over. As representatives of building service employees, 32BJ confronts this problem all the time among cleaning and security contractors. 32BJ negotiates collective bargaining agreement provisions that prevent this, requiring the new employer not only to hire the incumbent workers, but also requiring that they maintain the same wages, benefits, and other terms of employment. Thankfully, a number of years ago, Philadelphia enacted the Displaced Building Service Worker Ordinance, providing crucial job protections to vulnerable workers and ensuring that buildings are maintained and protected by the most experienced and qualified employees. To be sure, the law doesn't stop every bad actor. For example, in 2016, C.B. Richard Ellis purchased the luxury apartment building at 2116 Chestnut Street and hired a new management company, Graystar, who refused to hire the local 32BJ members who had maintained that building for years. But the ordinance is nonetheless a crucial protection for building service workers in Philadelphia. There are steps that City Council can take within their authority to provide, to further protect wages and benefits. A good first step would be to broaden the displaced worker ordinance to apply to other industries. And the best protection against lowering of standards during an employer transition is to create strong standards across the board, like Councilwoman Parker and others did with the paid sick leave and fair scheduling ordinances. In addition, Council could expand the just cause minimum staffing, prevailing wage, and 21st century minimum wage ordinances, and adopt other minimum employment standards such as paid vacation and family leave. The strides this city has already taken to protect the livelihoods of its citizens proves it is truly the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Local 32BJ is gratified that City Council has been at the forefront in understanding that improving the working conditions of all employees benefits not just the workers, but enhances the city's economic and social climate and improves the lives of all the citizens of Philadelphia. Local 32BJ pledges its full cooperation of efforts by this council to continue to raise standards for working people in their communities. I appreciate the opportunity to testify on this very important matter.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. Mr. Spear, I did not realize that it had been that long, 40 years. 40
For me?
years.
I'm younger than I look, I hope.
We appreciate and value very much the experience that you bring to the table. And as we work with the administration along with our law department,
Right.
We definitely, because we have a few things that are in the pipeline as we speak, but you know how delicate these situations are, and we want to make sure that whatever we're proffering, although anyone can challenge it in court, we want to make sure that we're on sound legal ground and sound legal
Yep.
footing. So we are going to depend on those 40 years to assist us in our efforts as we work on crafting some legislative prescriptions that we think will be very helpful on this issue.
I'll do my best. Thank you very much. I can also say the city solicitor's office has been very good. As you know, I deal with them in about other matters frequently, and they really show an openness to trying to better people's work lives. And
They have.
we appreciate that.
Our law department has done an outstanding job, and again, we all look forward. Everybody's around the table, and we're going to try to hammer out the best prescription that we can come up with. With that being said, let me just ask you, Ms. Shimko, relative to the mayor's office, for the benefit of somebody who's at home and they're thinking about the mayor's office of labor, and they just listen to the testimony coming from these workers, and they'll say, well, what kind of role does the Mayor's Office of Labor actually play in these types of situations when a new owner or operator comes in, or loses a contract and then tries not to honor a prior contract? Like, is there any specific role from an enforcement perspective with your office?
Beyond wage theft, which potentially does occur when a new contractor comes in and doesn't clearly change the terms of the agreement, so workers are now being paid less than what they thought they should have been being paid, there isn't anything specifically beyond that at this point.
So we wanted to make sure that we got that on the record again, because sometimes, and this has happened quite frequently in this body, the private sector will think that we as a legislative body are simply attempting to recommend the implementation and or passage of legislation to protect workers, particularly low-wage workers. They talk about this number. Philadelphia is the largest, poorest big city, in the nation. And when we hear testimony like we just heard from the prior panel as local elected officials, our goal is to find a way to protect the quality of life of workers, because we want them to be homeowners in neighborhoods. We want them to be parents who are going to PTA meetings. And if you can't figure out how you're going to make ends meet because you don't have any economic security, that's just not a problem for you and your household. That becomes a problem for the city. So that when we do proffer, and we're going to make sure, again, private sector, labor, administration council, everyone's going to be at the table as we work on putting our legislative initiatives together. But I want this record to reflect on today that this is not born or a knee-jerk reaction, what's going to be proffered, that council will just engage in. It is a response from the ground up. And just wanted that noted for the record. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Gill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So one of the questions that I had was if you could explain a little bit about how an employee may be told one thing about, like, for example, they're under a collective bargaining agreement, for example, sold to another company. What would make the employer, what are the responsibilities on the employer through the conclusion of a merger? And in fact, they should be made aware of how their collective bargaining rights may be changed. Is that right? It just seems that that's part of the discussion in play.
It should be, if we're talking about good actors, and I'll let sort of the experts answer a little bit more of the technical questions, but without successor language in a contract, there's something called the clear successor doctrine, and if a new buyer comes in and they make it very clear that they're not going to honor the current collective bargaining agreement, that's all they have to do. Mm-hmm. All they have to do is be very explicit that they're not going to honor it, and they don't have to. Mm-hmm. If they don't make it very clear that they're not going to honor it, there's potentially some wiggle room for unions and workers to fight and mandate that they do honor it. But I defer to some of the experts on the panel.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Patchen. I'm with the City Law Department in the Labor and Employment Unit. And again, I'll just, expand a little bit. I'll let Mr. Spear jump in if he wants to. But I think generally speaking, the successor doctrine is governed by the Federal National Labor Relations Act. And under the National Labor Relations Act, it's mostly a new company can come in and not be considered a clear successor. They were very slim and even slimmer in 2019 based on a recent NLRB decision. But there are slim occasions where an employer would be deemed a clear successor. But I think absent that, there's no obligation when a new employer comes in to honor the previous employer's terms. And I just want to take a step back and just say on behalf of the Law Department, we are committed and available to work with counsel as this process goes on and hopefully reaching a resolution.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, traditionally in any kind of a merger or a purchase of a company, that new owner looks at existing obligations, debt, if you could take a look at it, also assets as well. It just seems surprising that collective bargaining agreements, which extend beyond the life of, that merger, can't be seen in some ways as being part of a responsibility and obligation that is protected, and that, it just becomes something that they can, both the seller and the buyer can unilaterally, without collaboration with the union, can just abrogate, it's over, it's done, we're not going to do it now. Obviously, someone can sell and buy and make independent choices, but it seems strange when the two are able to do that. Obviously, that's federal law. That's not what we have the right to do. It's also normal, good human behavior and good business practices, also which we are not able to necessarily legislate. But we can set a floor, and I think what we're looking at is not setting the ceiling, like the best and most, perfect thing that you can do. But we do need to have floors when it seems that there are clear abuses that are happening. And if employees are not aware that in the sale of a merger, that they've simply lost retirement benefits, healthcare benefits, wages that have been previously collective bargaining. I'd like to continue that conversation. I'm not a lawyer, though, and I'm not in the federal, and I will leave it to you as an expert. Does the mayor's office explain to? We're just expanding with the mayor's office of labor, and we're really excited, Amanda, to have you there and your team. But has there been discussion about the need to inform employees in mergers and closings of what their labor rights are? I know they are also represented as well, but what the city can do or should be doing.
Yeah, we've recently began expanding on our business resources, right? So that looks like helping businesses get into compliance with all of the new labor laws. And with that expansion, we've decided that if we're expanding the resources that are available to businesses in order to be in compliance, that we should also be expanding the resources that are available to workers to understand how they can report compliance, but also to workers to understand what their rights are to form a union, what their rights are once they're in a union. And that will be coming available in the next year. So a lot of education around what workers' rights are and what around business responsibility is. So that is a part of our plan.
So Ms. Shingo, I know this preceded you, but the decision for the Fair Workweek law in Philadelphia was a change in a break from previous labor laws that the city had done before. And the biggest one was the decision not to eliminate collective bargaining units from the law, that they were not carved out effectively. And I think the idea around it was something that I spoke to a little bit earlier, which is that it doesn't seem right to unilaterally carve out collective bargaining units from rights that would be granted to others when they had previously negotiated rights without knowing that the new rights could exist. And we thought that there was federal case law that would have defended that. Our city solicitor was really great, and we appreciate that. As we kind of move forward on this, and we look at something like our paid sick leave, which does carve out collective bargaining units from the paid sick leave law that is otherwise granted to every other Philadelphian and a requirement of Philadelphia employers. Do you think we should be reviewing that law for whether collective bargaining units should be eliminated from that?
We would be in support of that.
A review?
Yes.
Of paid sick and other laws that would carve that out. And from the city solicitor's office, did you have any thoughts about a review?
Again, on behalf of the law department, we'd be happy to work with both parties here and reach some type of resolution.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, we worked with the city solicitor's office pretty carefully around Fair Workweek to make the case about why collective bargaining units should not be exempt from existing labor laws. They can always opt out. They can't be carved out, however. So I would look forward to be working with you on that as well.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could add a comment to what you
Please.
just asked. Again, as I said, the city has been very good under this administration in trying to help workers. But it's amid a backdrop, of course, that's dramatically different nationwide because we have a current presidential administration which is at war with workers and especially at war with unions. And I don't want to preach here, but it's very true that the National Labor Relations Board has made enormous strides in the last 2 years to really cut back on many workers' rights. And there's no sign that it will stop until there is a new administration, if there is a new administration. So with that backdrop, it's very important, I think, for state and local governments to try to pick up, the burden of trying to supply some of these protections that federal law is simply stripping away from workers.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. In previous testimony given by Ms. Gray, Ms. Gary from the District 1199C, she's an administrator for that union, and she had stated Sodexo at Hahnemann lost the contract. And then they refused or reneged on paying over $218,000 in compensation to employees that worked for them while they had that contract. How can they do that, and what can the city do about that in the future? Now, I know there may be some complicating factors in it. I'm not asking specifically on the case. You can actually look at it in a case that might be similar. You don't have to give me
So without all the facts,
Yes,
it's
correct.
hard to answer. But if in fact the workers were not made aware that there were going to be changes to the terms of the agreement and that the owner took over, assuming the contract, and then just didn't follow through, there could potentially be some wage theft that
I
we
would
can
think
look
so.
into.
Yes.
But it's hard to know what exactly is going on there. And that's with the current laws that we have. Obviously, there's potential to expand worker protections beyond that.
I mean, the kind of the facts that were given, and it doesn't have to be specific against Sodexo, but there may be other companies like it. They lost the contract, but yet Sodexo is a viable company with still having operations in Philadelphia. They owe $218,000 to the employees, and then which was a part of a contract, and then they just walk away. Now, of course, they're taking it to court, but are there other things that can be done from the city administration, particularly when a company like Sodexo, does not have to be Sodexo, continues to operate in the city of Philadelphia?
We can brainstorm some of those ideas and get back to you. I don't have any right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Sure. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. In the event of a change of ownership, is a new owner required to negotiate with a union before unilaterally just saying your contract is over? Is there any obligation at all around negotiations?
There are some obligations. It depends on how many workers have been hired by the new owner, what proportion, so that, as was said before, current doctrine says that if you hire a majority of the workforce, not to get into detail, but generally there can be some obligation to bargain with the union that represented the workers if a majority has been hired. That having been said, I also come back to what I just said about the Trump Labor Board. The Trump Labor Board is taking aim at certain doctrines, and that's one of the doctrines, and so that doctrine might get weakened in the next year or two.
That's helpful. I'm sure these are more conversations to continue, but thank you.
And that's even though there have been a number of Supreme Court decisions on that doctrine over the decades, but those only depend on the underlying rationale that the NLRB used to use. If they switch gears now and say, you know, we've reconsidered it and we'd just rather do something different, that's not to say that this Supreme Court wouldn't say, okay, all those old cases are kind of irrelevant right now, because now the NLRB is taking a different tack, and in the spirit of just saying, you know, new employers have the right to do anything they want, I don't see that that might not be the law in the next few years, regardless of what the previous union representation status might have been of the workers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Spear.
Thank you. And just want to just note for the record, particularly to the administration, that Mayor Kenny, you know, and your office, they have been awesome as we've gone through some of the growing pains as you are expanding. But I want to note for the record that I think I've been around for a few years between local and state government, and the city of Philadelphia has never taken such an aggressive stance in attempting to protect the rights of workers that we've seen over the last 4 years from this administration, and Mayor Kenny and his team are to be commended for that. Are there any more questions for members of this panel? There being none, is there anyone here wishing to testify on this resolution? There being no one else here to testify on this resolution, this concludes the business of the Committee on Labor and Civil Service for today. This public hearing on resolution number 190794 is recessed to the call of the chair. Thank you all very much for your testimony.